The bell above the restaurant door rang softly as the woman stepped inside, holding her daughter's small hand tightly in her own. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her clothes were clean but worn, her shoes slightly too big, as if they had been bought with hope that she would grow into them. The woman paused just inside the doorway, scanning the room with tired eyes. The smell of fresh bread and hot food filled the air, making her daughter's stomach growl loudly. "Mama, I'm hungry," the girl whispered, pressing her hand against her belly. The woman swallowed hard. "I know, baby," she said softly, brushing her daughter's hair back. "Just give me a minute." The restaurant was warm and bright, filled with the sound of cutlery clinking and low conversations. Families sat laughing at tables, couples shared meals, and plates full of food passed by like a painful reminder of everything she couldn't afford. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Every bit of strength she had left was for her daughter. She took a deep breath and walked toward the counter. Behind it stood the manager, a well-dressed man with a sharp expression and eyes that measured people not by who they were, but by what they could pay. He glanced up briefly, then looked back down at his phone, already annoyed. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice quiet but respectful. "I'm sorry to bother you." The manager sighed dramatically and looked up. "Yes, what do you want?" The woman hesitated, her cheeks burning. She could feel people starting to look at her. "I was wondering if there's any leftover food. Or maybe something small. My daughter hasn't eaten all day." The little girl tightened her grip on her mother's hand and looked up at the manager with wide, hopeful eyes. For a moment, there was silence. Then the manager laughed, a short, sharp laugh that cut through the room. "Leftover food," he repeated loudly, so others could hear. "This isn't a charity kitchen." The woman's face fell. "I understand," she said quickly. "I'm not asking for much. Just something simple. Even bread would be fine." The manager leaned forward, crossing his arms. "If you can't afford to eat here, you shouldn't come in. Customers don't want to see beggars while they're dining." A few people at nearby tables shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, others stared, curious but silent. The little girl's eyes filled with tears. "Mama," she whispered. The woman knelt down, pulling her daughter close. "It's okay," she murmured, though her voice trembled. She stood back up, trying one last time. "Please," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'll clean tables. I'll wash dishes. I'll do anything." The manager shook his head with a smirk. "We're not hiring. And even if we were, you don't look like you belong here." That was when a tray slipped from the woman's hands. She hadn't even realized she was holding it, an empty tray someone had left near the counter. It clattered loudly onto the floor, the sound echoing through the restaurant. Everyone turned to look. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, bending down to pick it up. Her hands were shaking now. Hunger, exhaustion, and humiliation all crashing down at once. The manager's voice rose. "I said enough. Take your kid and leave before I call security." Tears streamed down the little girl's face. She didn't understand money or restaurants or pride. She only knew she was hungry, and that her mother was being treated like she didn't matter. The woman stood there for a moment longer, her shoulders slumped, as if she were carrying the weight of the world alone. Then she turned toward the door, her head bowed. She didn't notice the man sitting in the corner. He had been there the whole time, dressed simply, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. His eyes never left the scene at the counter. His jaw tightened as he watched the manager's behavior, the cruelty in his words, the way power was being misused. No one knew it yet, but the CEO of the company was watching. And this was only the beginning. The woman reached for the restaurant door, her hand trembling as she tried to push it open. Her daughter clung to her coat, wiping her tears with the back of her sleeve. Every step toward the exit felt heavier than the last, as if the room itself was pushing them out. "Wait." The voice was calm, but firm. The woman froze. The manager looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Sir, this doesn't concern you," he said quickly, already defensive. The man in the corner slowly stood up. He wasn't dressed like a billionaire or a powerful executive. No expensive suit, no bodyguards, just a simple jacket, neatly pressed, and an expression that carried quiet authority. He placed a few bills on the table for the untouched coffee and walked toward the counter, his footsteps steady, deliberate. "It does concern me," the man said, his eyes locked on the manager. I've been sitting here for the last 20 minutes. The manager forced a laugh. Sir, I'm handling a situation. These people were asking for free food. The man glanced at the woman and her daughter. The child hid behind her mother's leg, peeking out nervously. He noticed how thin the woman looked, how carefully she tried to stand tall despite the shame she had just been handed. Is that true? The man asked gently. The woman hesitated, then nodded. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to cause trouble. The man turned back to the manager. She apologized. You laughed. The manager's smile disappeared. Look, we have rules. If we let everyone in here asking for handouts, we'd go out of business. Rules, the man repeated. Interesting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With one tap, he opened an app and turned the screen toward the manager. The manager's face drained of color. On the screen was a company profile, the restaurant chain's logo, and beneath it, a name. Founder and CEO. The room fell silent. Nearby customers leaned in, sensing something big had just changed. The manager swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I didn't know." "That's clear," the man replied calmly. "If you did, you might have behaved differently." The manager straightened his posture, forcing a nervous chuckle. "I was just doing my job." "No," the CEO said, his voice low but sharp. "You were doing what you thought you could get away with when no one important was watching." The woman stood frozen, confused, her heart pounding. She didn't fully understand what was happening, only that the tone of the room had shifted. The CEO knelt down in front of the little girl, bringing himself to her level. "What's your name?" he asked kindly. Lily, she said softly. "Lily," he smiled. "What would you like to eat?" The girl looked up at her mother, unsure if she was allowed to answer. "Go ahead," her mother whispered. "Pancakes," Lily said. "With syrup." The CEO stood and turned to the manager. "2 pancake meals, juice, and whatever else she wants." "Of course," the manager said quickly. "Right away. And a full meal for her mother," the CEO added. "On the house." The manager nodded repeatedly. "Yes, sir, absolutely." The CEO's eyes hardened. "Don't say, sir, now. Say, I'm sorry." The manager's mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he looked at the woman. "I'm sorry." The apology sounded thin, but it was forced out all the same. The CEO gestured toward a nearby table. "Please," he said to the woman. "Sit, eat. You're welcome here." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know how much this means." "I think I do," the CEO replied quietly. As the kitchen hurried to prepare the food, the CEO turned his attention back to the manager. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 3 years, the manager answered nervously. "And in those 3 years," the CEO said, "how many times have you treated people this way?" The manager hesitated. That silence was answer enough. The CEO folded his arms. "Leadership isn't about protecting profits at the cost of dignity," he said. "It's about knowing who we are when no one's looking." The plates arrived, steaming and generous. Lily's eyes lit up as the food was set in front of her. For the first time that day, she smiled. But the story wasn't over yet. Because the CEO wasn't just there to feed a hungry child. He was there to make a decision that would change everything. Where there had been tension and whispers before, there was a heavy silence filled with anticipation. Customers pretended to focus on their meals, but everyone was listening. The manager stood stiffly behind the counter, his confidence completely gone, while the woman and her daughter sat at the table the CEO had pointed out. Lily picked up her fork carefully, as if the food might disappear if she moved too fast. She took her first bite of pancakes, her eyes widening with joy. "Mama, it's so good," she said, syrup on her lips. Her mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears slipping through her fingers. She nodded, unable to speak, afraid that if she did, she might start crying and never stop. The CEO watched them quietly for a moment. Then he turned back to the manager. "Walk with me," he said. The manager hesitated, then followed him toward the far side of the restaurant, away from the tables. Every step felt like a countdown. "You embarrassed her," the CEO said calmly. "You embarrassed a child. Do you understand what that means?" "I was under pressure," the manager said quickly. We get people like that all the time. People like that, the CEO repeated, his voice colder now. Explain what you mean, the manager faltered. I just meant, people who can't pay. The CEO stopped walking and turned to face him. Every customer who walks through that door is a person first. If you forget that, you don't belong in this company. The manager's face flushed. Sir, please, I warned you once, the CEO said, raising a hand. This conversation isn't about pleading. It's about accountability. He took a breath, then spoke clearly. You're suspended, effective immediately. The manager's eyes widened. Suspended. There will be an investigation, the CEO continued. And based on what I've seen today, termination is very likely. The manager's shoulders slumped. He nodded silently, knowing there was nothing left to say. The CEO turned and walked back toward the table. The woman stiffened when she saw him approach, worry flickering across her face. I'm sorry if we caused trouble, she said quickly. We can leave. No, the CEO said gently. You're not going anywhere. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, keeping his voice low so only they could hear. Can I ask you something? He said. She nodded. How long have you been struggling like this? The woman hesitated, then spoke quietly. Since my husband passed away. 2 years ago. I work when I can, but some days, there's nothing. The CEO listened without interrupting. I just wanted her to eat, she continued, her voice breaking. Just one good meal. You did the right thing, he said firmly. Never apologize for protecting your child. Lily looked up from her plate. Are we in trouble? She asked softly. The CEO smiled at her. No, sweetheart, you're safe. He reached into his wallet and placed a card on the table. This is my direct number, he said to the woman. I also run a foundation that helps families get back on their feet. Job placement, rent support, food assistance. Her hands shook as she picked up the card. I don't know how to thank you. By letting us help, he replied. He stood and addressed the room, his voice steady but strong. I want to make something clear, he said. This restaurant exists because of people. Not profits. Not policies. People. Some customers nodded. A few quietly clapped. The CEO looked at the staff behind the counter. From today forward, he continued, anyone who comes here hungry will be treated with dignity. If you can't do that, you don't work for me. The woman hugged her daughter tightly. For the first time in months, she felt hope, real hope. As they finished their meal, a server brought over a small bag of food. For later, she said with a smile. The woman stood to leave, her posture straighter now. Thank you, she said one last time. The CEO nodded. This isn't the end, he said. It's a new beginning. As the door closed behind them, the restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but everyone inside knew they had just witnessed something powerful. Because kindness, when backed by action, can change lives. And that day, it did.